Good evening, everyone. I'm Katherine Raphaelson, president of SID-Washington, and I'm delighted to welcome you to our 2016 annual dinner. We have a great crowd here tonight. We have, I think, over 730, maybe 740 people in this room, and I think that may be a record for us. Looking around the room, I see we have a number of new people in addition to the usual suspects. We're really pleased to have several embassies represented here tonight, including the embassies of Colombia, the Republic of Albania, Panama, and Brazil. And I want to thank Arizona State University for bringing such a terrific group together. For the sake of our embassy guests and for others who may be new to this event, let me explain a little bit about SID-Washington and why we gather each year for this occasion. We pride ourselves on being the town square for international development, where practitioners and policymakers, think tanks and universities, governments and civil society organizations, and others can all come together and discuss what is working, what isn't, and figure out solutions collaboratively that will help solve the biggest challenges in international development today. Each year at our annual dinner, we gather to take stock of the past year and celebrate those who have contributed in an extraordinary way to our field. But we also gather to celebrate each other and all of our accomplishments. As most of you know, SID-Washington members include people and organizations from all sectors of development. Our purpose is to provide a forum for you to network and share information. We are primarily a convener, and I think we convened tonight. Our ability to bring together a diverse group of people and institutions is more important than ever as we work together on our shared priorities and focus on solutions for a greatly troubled world. This is perhaps even more important as a new administration takes over in Washington and begins to implement a new U.S. development agenda. We are working on establishing relationships with key new players, as well as maintaining our connections with longtime friends in government to help keep our members connected and informed. And as we contemplate the future of international development and foreign aid, we increasingly find ourselves focusing a lot of energy on our young people, the next generation. So it is fitting that tonight we honor Carrie Hessler-Radelet, Director of the U.S. Peace Corps. With more than 80%, and that's not to say that Carrie is a young people, but I'm also not saying she's not a young person. But what I'm really saying is that with more than 80% of its volunteers coming from the 22 to 30-year-old age group and an overall average age of 28, the Peace Corps also focuses a lot of its attention on young people. We had a smaller event at SID-Washington recently, and we asked the audience to raise their hands if they had served in the Peace Corps. It was astounding to see how many hands went in the air. So I want to ask the same here tonight, but I'm going to ask you to stand up if you have ever served in the U.S. Peace Corps, even if you're not a young person. Can you please stand up? Many of our institutional member organizations hire newly returned Peace Corps volunteers, or RPCVs, to work in their organizations because not only are they young, smart, and dedicated to development, but they also bring a wealth of new programmatic experience. To a certain extent, the U.S. Peace Corps is serving as a vital lifeline of sustainable professional development for our community. Similarly, our university members are also nurturing our future workforce. Arizona State University, one of our diamond-level sponsors, brought 8 USAID Research and Innovation Fellowship students tonight as their guests. This fellowship connects top graduate students with in-country host organizations to collaboratively apply science, technology, and innovation to complex development challenges. ASU is one of 6 universities partnering with USAID on this program, which operates through the agency's Global Development Lab. In addition, we have 5 exceptional students from the Georgetown School of Foreign Service here as part of a student sponsorship purchased by RTI. All of these students are committed to international development and have exciting futures ahead of them. So if you've not met them yet, try to do so before the evening ends. I also want to mention that SID-Washington employs young professionals, most coming right out of college. In fact, if you take me out of the equation, the average age of the SID-Washington staff is 23. If you add me back in, it's 23 and a half. And yet, they can put on an event like this single-handedly. This event is the work of my 4 staff and 2 interns with an average age of 23. So in addition to celebrating achievements in international development, I think we should celebrate our young people, those here tonight and those working in the field, in the Peace Corps, and with our many member organizations, the international development leaders of tomorrow. We look to all of you to unite us in our efforts to create a better world for us all. Before we move on, I want to say that this evening would not be possible without the generous support of our sponsors. We want to mention in particular 2 sponsors who have provided extraordinary support to us this year: ACOM and Arizona State University. We're very grateful to both of you. We also want to thank our platinum-level sponsors whose contributions are truly significant: Apt Associates, Chemonics, Creative Associates, DAI, FHI 360, and Tetra Tech. Thank you all so much. And now, to tell you more about our honoree, I'd like to introduce SID-Washington's Chairman of the Board and Executive Vice President of the QED Group, Byron Radcliffe.
Thank you, Catherine, and good evening, everyone. 55 years ago, President John F. Kennedy founded the Peace Corps. And since that time, 225,000 volunteers have served in 141 countries. As Catherine noted tonight, many of you in this room are returned Peace Corps volunteers. The reputation and impact of that organization is enormous on our industry. Tonight, we're honoring the chair of that, Carrie Hessler-Radelet. Carrie began her career in international development and with the Peace Corps in 1981, when she was positioned in Western Samoa. At the time, she worked in education and then moved into public health, focusing on HIV/AIDS, maternal and child health. Volunteerism appears to be in her family's blood, as her aunt was the 10,000th Peace Corps volunteer in the 1960s in Turkey, Her grandparents were Peace Corps volunteers in the 70s in Malaysia, and recently her nephew was a Peace Corps volunteer in Mozambique. As the 19th director of the US Peace Corps, Carrie has made a significant impact on the agency. But before I say more about Carrie, I just want to reflect on some of the challenges and changes we're seeing in the industry right now. First, our community is managing multiple growing crises throughout the world: fighting Ebola, Zika, insecurity, humanitarian crises, and national disasters. Our community is no stranger to these issues and these challenges, as many of you here work on them constantly and are engaged in trying to find solutions to lessen the terrible impact of these crises that cause. Secondly, we're all aware of the new terrorist threats that are always present, as we've seen in Brussels, Paris, Istanbul, and even here on US soil. Instability and insecurity are growing in many regions, and here again, our community is doing their best to design solutions to address these challenges and changes. Lastly, here in the US, we've just experienced what most would consider a fairly heated presidential campaign. As with all presidential elections and changes in the administration, we find ourselves in a period of uncertainty about what might be forthcoming. We're wondering how the various policy and personnel changes will impact the work that we do, as well as the administration that will affect our strategic work and instruments of foreign aid, such as the State Department, USAID, the MCC, and of course, the Peace Corps. But this is a challenge we face after every presidential election. The point of all of this is the change is constant, and that in order to go forward, we have to adjust to change and adjust to those challenges, which brings me back to Carrie, for this is exactly what she did when she became the director of the Peace Corps. Seeing a changing world, she led the agency through the most extensive reforms in its history, making it more accessible, innovative, and as well as modernizing and strengthening it to address the challenges of the volunteers in the future 21st century. One of the most profound changes that Carrie made was initiating the revitalization of the process for volunteer recruitment, application, and selection. And as a result of these changes that she created, this past year they had the largest number of applications in their history. As director, she's also forged very innovative strategic partnerships with universities and development organizations to ensure that the Peace Corps volunteers can have maximum input. One partnership in which First Lady Michelle Obama and the White House played an extensive role is Let Girls Learn. This initiative brings together the Department of State, USAID, the MCC, and the Peace Corps, along with other agencies, as well as corporate and philanthropic donors. The purpose of Let Girls Learn is to expand educational opportunities to girls, especially in crisis areas. This initiative combines the necessary political will, diplomacy, grassroots, organizing and development, and expertise to create a lasting change. Another initiative that Carrie has led has been the Global Health Services Partnership. Using former Peace Corps volunteers through the Peace Corps Response Program, this initiative sends physicians and nurses that are seasoned professionals on short-term, high-impact assignments to teach in developing countries. Prior to her time at the Peace Corps, Carrie had already had a distinguished career working for John Snow and USAID. As Vice President Director of the Washington office of John Snow, she oversaw public health programs in more than 85 countries. At USAID, she was one of the leading voices in forces helping to establish PEPFAR, and was one of the primary writers of its first strategic plan. She was also a Johns Hopkins Fellow for USAID in Indonesia, where she helped local authorities implement the nation's first AIDS strategy. It's clear that she's a very focused hard worker in all that she takes on, yet she's also an incredible mother, wife, daughter, niece, and cousin, and not just to her US family. Last summer, Carrie and her husband Steve returned to Samoa after more than 30 years and were reunited with their host family there, and in particular, her host mother, Losa. who inspired Carrie's career in public health. And we are deeply grateful to LOFSA for planting that seed in Carrie, for all the impact Carrie has then done around the world. She's impacted hundreds of thousands of lives. So you can see just from this short background, I'm sure you can see why the Washington, D.C. chapter, the Society for International Development, has selected Carrie Hessler-Radelet to receive its 2016 Award for Leadership and Development. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in congratulating Carrie upon receiving this award.
Wow, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I am totally humbled by this honor. I have to say, I mean, this room is filled with people who have spent their entire career trying to create a better world, and I'm sure that there are many people who deserve this honor more than I do. That said, here I am, and I'm so very grateful. I stand on the shoulders of a lot of people at the Peace Corps and at the National Peace Corps Association, our alumni association for returned volunteers, who have worked many years, 7 long years, to help us ensure that the Peace Corps is strategic, that it's impactful, and that it's volunteer-centered, including Aaron Williams, who was the director of the Peace Corps when I was deputy, and he's here today. I'd like to ask him to stand. Aaron, please stand. There he is, Aaron Williams. His leadership inspired me and taught me, and I'm so very grateful. And then there's all of you. You know, I was talking to someone earlier, and I said that it sort of feels like a wedding, because there's all these people from different parts of my life who are here, so many dear friends. Only my wedding was about a fifth the size of this gathering. The other thing I would say related to the wedding is I am also incredibly grateful that my husband, Steve Radelet, is here. He is my best friend, and he has been by my side for 35 years of marriage and 40 years of life, and I'm so grateful to be traveling this journey with you. Like all of you, I'm here tonight because I've seen how the work that we do, the work that all of us do, changes lives. Not only overseas, but right here at home. Here in this building, which is home to so many different institutions that serve our nation overseas, in the work that we do in our NGOs and other US government agencies, and in our hearts, because the work that we do changes lives. And as I step down from Peace Corps and prepare for the next chapter in my life, I've been doing a lot of thinking about that uncertain, unpredictable, terrifying, and thrilling place we call the future. Frankly, it's really easy to be cynical about the world in which we live today. Just a quick glance at the headlines and you'll see a deadly civil war in Syria, refugee crisis in Europe, violence on university campuses across the United States, the aftermath of a very divisive election, stories of economic hardship, and people at the end of their rope. But the truth is, never before in the history of the world have we witnessed progress of the magnitude that has been demonstrated over the last 25 years in addressing poverty, in improving health, increasing incomes, and reducing conflict. Yeah. Now, you may not be surprised by that fact. After all, this is your life and your life's work. But some of you may actually be surprised by that fact. And if you are not alone. Most Americans believe that the world is a far worse off place today than it was even 10 or 20 years ago. But actually, the opposite is quite true. For example, in the decades since the Cold War, nearly 1 billion people have been lifted out of extreme poverty. 1 billion. That is not only remarkable, it is absolutely unprecedented in all of human history. Unprecedented. In fact, we have made more progress in the last 20 years than we have in the last 500 years combined. It is a fact, and it is extraordinary. When I joined the Peace Corps as a volunteer 35 years ago, nearly 70 out of every 1,000 children died of malnutrition-related causes or some other childhood illness that is preventable. That number has now been cut in half. Today, 18.2 million people are on life-saving antiretrovirals. And in many places around the world, HIV is no longer a deadly disease. And in the past 15 years, the expansion of malaria interventions have helped to reduce malaria incidence by 37% globally and 42% in Africa. The good news continues. The number of college graduates globally is 4 times higher for men than it was in 1970s and 70 times higher than it is for women. Yeah. With the lone exception of Cuba, every country in this hemisphere has become a democracy. Some function better than others, that's for sure, but citizens throughout the Americas have the right and the opportunity to change their leaders with a vote at the ballot box and not at the point of a gun. That's pretty extraordinary. Even though reports of violent conflict dominate the news, and they do, the world has become a more peaceful place, whether measured by the number of wars, the scale of conflict, or the number of lives lost to acts of violence. Now, that is not to deny that violence is all too real in our world today, and that today the number of displaced people globally has never been higher in our history, in the whole history of humanity. So that is a problem. It is also not to diminish the importance of the division that we're facing right here in our country, both in terms of ethnic and racial division, but also in terms of economic disparity, growing economic disparity. But I think it's useful to take a fresh look at the incredible progress that we have made, that humanity has made over the last quarter century in almost every measure of development, and consider how we can continue to build upon that momentum into the future. We need to shine a light on this tremendous progress and the critical leadership role that the US has played, and all of us have played. It's essential that US leadership in this area continues, absolutely essential. Because in this increasingly interconnected world, we're going to have to rely on each other more, not less. What this means is that we're going to need to increase understanding, mutual understanding, collaboration with people of different cultures, different languages, different belief systems, different economic classes, and different races, overseas and also right here at home, even when it's hard, even when it's painful. In this post-election season, we stand at a crossroads. The future has not yet unrolled. We each have a choice to make on how we will embrace that future. So as I accept this incredible honor tonight, with great gratitude, I leave you with 3 challenges, and these are the same 3 challenges that I've given myself as I contemplate the next chapter in my life. So challenge 1, look at the stars, or stated more simply, stay optimistic. We are all in the gutter, but some of us look at the stars. These are the immortal words of Oscar Wilde and Lady Windermere's fan. Stated differently, Winston Churchill famously said, "A pessimist sees a difficulty in every opportunity. An optimist sees an opportunity in every difficulty." If we're going to make a difference in our country and our world, we need to look with optimism at the opportunities and challenges that our world faces. Every single day, I meet someone whose life is a testament to the possibility of a brighter day. Let me tell you about Peter Terr. Peter was born in South Sudan at age 3 or 4, and he's not sure how old he was. His community was attacked by Sudanese militants who burned down his village and murdered most of his family. Peter wandered in the bush with a band of boys for many years, traveling to South Sudan, to Ethiopia, and finally he made his way to Kenya, where he entered a refugee camp, a UN refugee camp. It was there where he first learned to read and had his first formal schooling. He was an incredibly bright and motivated student, and eventually, with the help of the United Nations, he made his way to the United States. He worked incredibly hard, and he finally got a GED, and then he earned a full scholarship to the University of Florida. After graduating with honors, he joined the Peace Corps because he wanted to serve the United States, the country that had given him so much. For after all, he had arrived as a refugee on our shores, and our country had welcomed him. When Peter applied to the Peace Corps, he made one request. His request that he would be sent to a Muslim country because, in his own words, he did not want to live his life fearing the people who shared the Islamic faith with those who had murdered his family. The only way he knew to seek reconciliation and to learn to love Muslims was to live among them. Those are Peter's words. Peter received a Peace Corps assignment to teach English in Azerbaijan, which is a Muslim-majority country where many people were suspicious of Americans and most had never seen a person of color before. An Azeri family in Peter's small village opened their home to him, and they welcomed him like a son. And that was the beginning of Peter's long retreat from the anger and fear that had gripped him ever since his family had been taken from him decades ago. He learned to love the Azeri people with whom he lived and worked each day, and they learned to love him. In Peter's words, what surprised me most was how human love and connection became stronger than my tragic family history, my religion, my nationality, or the color of my skin. Peter worked as a teacher at a school where more than half the girls dropped out before they completed secondary school. That was the way things were, he was told when he arrived. That was the way they have always been, he was told. Yet the more Peter delved into Azeri culture, the more in-depth knowledge he gained about the Islamic faith, the more he began to believe that there could be a different path forward for girls who wanted education. Peter's job was to teach, yet he also saw himself as a student. He studied with the local imams. He read the Quran with them. He asked questions of them, and he got to know all about their faith and their culture. And when he approached families and community leaders about delaying marriage and letting girls stay in school, he offered not forceful arguments, but stories and verses from the very Quran that they studied. Slowly, gradually, they began to listen. In time, the number of girls in Peter's school equaled the number of boys, parity that was not found in any other school in Peter's region. Peter says about his experience, the best way to learn about the world and to make a difference is by being fearless for the sake of wanting to do good for humanity. Being fearless for the sake of wanting to do good for humanity. His is an incredible, a remarkable story of reconciliation and love, and the courage it takes to find forgiveness and forge common ground. When faced with his devastating loss, Peter could have chosen anger and divisiveness and fear. Instead, he chose purpose and activism and optimism. By choosing optimism over despair, Peter turned his personal tragedy into an opportunity to serve others. Like Peter, I urge all of us to have that kind of defiant optimism that sees the world as it is, with all its pain and all its peril, but also sees the world for what it can become, with all its potential and all its promise, and believe in what it can become. Now, I am really thrilled because Peter Terr is here with us tonight. He has just returned from 5 years of Peace Corps service, And I would like Peter to rise so that we could acknowledge and honor his service. Okay. Challenge number 2, cultivate strange bedfellows. Now, this phrase was made popular by George Dudley Warner and referred to politics, usually in a pejorative way. But I say that strange bedfellows are a good thing because we need to cultivate supportive relationships with a diverse network of stakeholders who understand the importance of our work and are willing to go to bat for us. We in the development community need to reach out much more proactively to folks in the business, military, and domestic audiences. We need to learn from them, and we need to help them see that by helping other nations build the foundations of prosperity, stability, and peace, we assure our own leadership, economic growth, and security. We need strange bedfellows to carry the message that economically stable countries that respect the right of its citizens are safer, more prosperous, and better global partners. We need their voices to promote the fact that by investing in the people of developing nations around the world, we ensure that they feel a connection with the United States and share our values. And by the way, it's the right thing to do for humanity. For in the words of Martin Luther King, we are all caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied into a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. We need all stakeholders to recognize the critical importance of our work. Let me tell you a story that I heard just a few months ago from U.S. Ambassador to Afghanistan, Carl Eikenberry, who had previously served as a lieutenant general in the U.S. Army. Ambassador Eikenberry told me that when he was ambassador there was a terrible, bloody war in Helmand province in which 15 Marines had lost their lives. In the end, the U.S. Afghani forces were victorious, and they were able to regain a key district from the Taliban. Ambassador Eikenberry decided that he wanted to go out and see this reclaimed territory to establish relationships with the local chieftains. When he arrived, one of the local elders approached him and asked him a question in Pashtun. Ambassador Eikenberry wondered what the elder was talking about. It was clear that he was very excited about something. The translator told him that the elder was asking him about a man named Rick. Ambassador Eikenberry looked confused. Is there someone out here on our team named Rick? Kind of looked around. No, nobody named Rick. The translator asked the elder for clarification. Rick, Peace Corps, the elder replied. He lived here 40 years ago. He was my teacher, and he taught me English. He lived among us for 2 years, and he was like a brother to me. He shared his life and his culture with me, and I taught him all about Afghanistan. When I heard the Americans were coming, I was hoping that Rick would be among you. Ambassador Eikenberry told me that when he went home that night, he could not sleep. He could not sleep. The reason was he realized that those 15 Marines who had given their lives in battle, their names would never be known by that community. But that one Peace Corps volunteer who had served 40 years earlier was absolutely loved like a brother by that community. It was then, he told me, that I began to understand the transformative power of the Peace Corps. The relationship of friendship and trust between that one Peace Corps volunteer and that village elder clearly transcended time and geography and war and politics. Ambassador Eikenberry has become one of our most outspoken and I would say active supporters, and he's a very active supporter of USAID and many of the work that you do here. Cultivate strange bedfellows. We need their help, and we have a lot to learn from them. So that's lesson number 2. My last challenge is be the change you seek in the world. Those of us who work in international development have been given an incredible gift. We've had the privilege of being able to step outside our culture and our national boundaries, to work and even to live, perhaps, among people from other lands. In many cases, they have welcomed us. They have opened up their homes, they've opened up their hearts, their workplaces, their challenges, and their opportunities. We do this work because we love it. It gives our life meaning, and our lives have been changed by the people that we have known and met and worked with through our work in international development. Our work takes us to some of the world's most daunting places, and in those places, we invariably find proof of humanity's incredible resilience. In some of the humblest corners of our globe, we find people who live with love and dignity and kindness no matter how much or how little they have and how much they have to overcome. We find people who stand tall and hold strong, even when it seems that they have every reason to break. These are the people in countries around the world who inspire us, who motivate us, and who keep us humble. These are the people who teach us, even as we teach them as well. And by working side by side together, we have made the incredible progress that I just described a few moments ago. It's a partnership. At a time when our nation's focus is fixed on all that divides us, we in the development community have a singular advantage. We have seen through our own work and the work of our colleagues that finding common ground and fostering cooperation in the face of seemingly intractable differences is not just the best way forward. In many cases, it is the only way forward. Because we have seen the costs of division and the stakes. Division isn't just about the hot air that ignites the airwaves and fuels the headlines. It's about the fear that hardens into walls between people. It's about the anger that radicalizes the marginalized, the disaffected, the ignored. It's about the hatred that rips apart the seams of our society. Tonight, as we gather at a time of tremendous change for our nation and our world, I urge us as a community to bring the hard-won lessons of global development back home. I challenge our community to approach the divides in our own nation as we would approach the barriers that create rifts between people overseas. I challenge us to open our hearts and open our minds to our own countrymen and women who stand tall and hold strong, even though they battle job loss, opioid addiction, limited opportunities for education, or improper documentation. Can we honor differences among our own people and refuse to abide by bigotry, hatred, and intolerance of any kind? Can we work to promote peace and justice overseas? While we work to promote peace and justice overseas, can we also commit to doing the same right here at home? Can we find a way to step into another's shoes and really, truly listen to them, even if they voted for another candidate? In the words of Gandhi, can we be the change we wish to see in the world? There's a choice. There's a choice when all we see around us is rancor and division, when all we see are borders and divides. Because here's what I have seen over the course of my time at Peace Corps and throughout my career in international development. Finding common ground is a matter of choice. Even when we do not see eye to eye with someone, we can still stand with them side by side, heart to heart. We can choose to build bridges where others would build walls. We can choose optimism. We can choose healing. We can choose unity. We can choose peace, abroad and here at home. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie, for those remarks and for all that you've done for the many Peace Corps volunteers around the world and the impact you've made on their lives and the people that they've served. Thank you very much. As I mentioned earlier this evening, many in this room are wondering how the various policy and political changes with the new administration will affect our work in strategic alliances and instruments of foreign assistance. SID-Washington is actively involved right now in reaching out and engaging the new administration in all aspects of global development. As we see discussions as collaborative exercise where SID members are well educated and informed about U.S. government planning and programs as they relate to global development, and where the U.S. government can receive SID's honest input, feedback, and innovative ideas in order to help make global development programs more effective and efficient. Given SID's unique status as the premier convener or town hall for global development discussions, we seek to advance equitable development discussions by bringing diverse constituencies together to debate critical ideas, policies, and practices. This is SID's mission, and this is exactly what we plan to do in 2017 with the new administration. An additional important election also occurred this year, and that was the election of the 2016-2017 Board of Directors for SID. And I'd like to ask very quickly if the SID board members who are here today could please stand. These people all have very busy lives and are generously giving us their time and talents to develop our chapter. But in addition to the board, all of you who are here tonight are the lifeblood of SID. So for all of you, we look to you for suggestions and ideas during this very important time in our history of what we should be addressing and talking about. So please reach out to the board members, reach out to Katherine and myself with your ideas. Again, this is all of our chapter together. Finally, I'd like to take a moment to thank Katherine, the SID staff, the volunteers, and our sponsors for making tonight possible. And I personally want to thank each of you and every one of your organizations for the work you're all doing to improve the lives of people around the world. We work in some very dangerous and impossible places, and I know at times we look for impact, and what we hope would take days takes years. But at the end result, we know all the work and frustration is worth it. So thank you all for this work that you're doing. And finally, I would like to say happy holidays, safe travels, and we look forward to seeing you at another SID event and at our annual conference this summer. So safe travels.